welcome back to Richard's RCs. This is part 2 of the Thunder Tiger SSK. I'm basically going to be taking a look at some mechanicals on this one. I'm going to be changing the shocks as well. The ones that are on here are trash, they've had it. So I'm going to be putting some new ones on. Pretty sure this is just front wheel drive as well, so I'm going to be taking out the diffs. Might as well make sure this is actually going to work properly and not in front wheel drive before I start taking things any further. So yeah, here it is in all its glory. As I mentioned in the previous videos, the front diff seems fine. As soon as I go to do that, this spur in the middle is moving, but we've got nothing happening at the back. We try that with the back, I've got absolutely nothing whatsoever. Got no diff or nothing. I do have a few spare diffs kicking about. I have no idea if they're going to fit, but at least if we can get this working, then hopefully the project is a go. So I'm going to make a start getting this front end off. And to get this front end off, I believe we're going to have to take this top plate off here. Underneath, there's going to be some screws here for all this housing, and hopefully this whole front end should just come off as one. So I'm also not going to be using any power tools on here. I would usually use something like electric screwdriver, but with this age, I don't really want to be stripping things, so we're just going to be going for just a hand tool. Let's start getting this top plate off. Just so I've got a bit better access as well, I'm going to go and take these wheels off as well. Off camera, I've just removed the 2 bolts for the steering links, just so hopefully this front end will come off. I will now look at taking off the 4 here. And there we go, guys, that is the front differential, housing, suspension all off in one. I personally find it's much easier to take things like this apart like this rather than it being on the car. One problem we've encountered straight away is the bolts which bolts this onto. I don't know if we can see this here, but these are pretty much like a banana now. I'm not sure where I would get something like this from. I could probably replace it with a hex bolt, but I'm just going to try and straighten these out. In the previous video I mentioned about the front body mounts are completely snapped. I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit there and you'll be able to see that there. These are completely snapped. So what I do have, these weren't actually mine. There's a guy I know who has lots of spares for certain things. If we can see that there in the light, I know I've got the best light in here. These were just some body mounts that he had lying about. I'm hoping these might just go on here and I'll have something to put the body back on with. So let's get these old body mounts off if we can. Oh, we've got a bolt in the back there, so need another tool. There's just a little nut on the back of there. You'll always get plenty of these in different kits. These are handy for a job like this. So it would appear that these body posts that we do have, try and get that a bit more in focus there, probably isn't going to fit. Now, the reason why, again, I don't know if you can see this on camera, those old body posts have like a square mounting in there which goes into the top. So what I think I'll probably try and do, because again the issue with these is I don't actually know if these are long enough, so I'm going to reposition these. I'm going to put them in there. There's a hole in the top, and at least that way I've got some sort of body post to try and mount this body back onto. So So there we are. I've just quickly done that off camera just because I've had to make the holes, well, the mounting holes on these just a little bit bigger because the screw wouldn't go through. But yeah, we've now got some body posts. They're going to move around quite a bit because they're not supposed to be there. But this is just to try and get the body back on. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take off these two shocks. Straight away, we have a mix and match of different components on here. So we've got the Phillips on here and the hex at the bottom. Anything that I find needs replacing, I'll replace from my spares box. A little tip I will give to people as well, if you're ever taking an RC apart and you're unsure of where your bolts and stuff are going to go, I personally put them back in, especially if it's something I've never worked on before, just so I don't lose track of where things are going to go. We'll now take these two nuts off the top for the shocks. Need a Phillips for the back there. These are going to be the new shocks that are going on. You can see the springs on these ones are just a little bit thicker. These are really soft. They make a really, I don't know if you can hear that, really squelchy. And yeah, they're just, I don't like those. Oops. These are just a lot stiffer. So they're going to go on, but I'm going to put them on toward the end. So to get into this diff casing now, I am going to start looking at taking the shock towers off and the two screws that go through here. You need to be careful with stuff like this. This isn't going to come out. So really make sure your screws are in there to make sure you don't round anything off. That one was tight as well. There we have the shock tower off. This in here with the bolts. There's a little tip for you. You're ever doing things like this. Little trays like this are really handy if you can find them. So that's obviously the front that we took off, and then I've got the shock tower in there with the bolts. So it looks as if this is bolted in from the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is take off the two screws there, and hopefully this will remove all this, and then I can get to the two screws that I can see on either side, and I think that this top cover will come off. So the more and more I take this apart, the more and more I am finding things like this. Completely and utterly bent. Hopefully I can straighten this out. There, you've got 4 screws on the bottom, and I think this cover will come off from the top. There we go, as I suspected, that came apart in 2. As I was taking these out, the output cups fell off. I suspect over time these have just loosened themselves. They only have a little grub screw on one side, but these are absolutely filthy. So I'll clean up stuff like this, and I'll Loctite all the grub screws back in place. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these 4 out. I don't think it will be, but I'm just going to check and see if this is an oil-filled differential or if it's a grease-filled differential. I'm just going to clean off all this old grease that's probably been on here for God knows how long. How old is the car? From the 2000s, 2005, did I say in the last video? Can't remember. It's probably the first time these differentials have seen the light of day. Things like these screws are really small. You do take off stuff like this, just be very careful what you're doing, because especially with Phillips heads like these, you're going to strip them if you're not careful. and just look at the state of these. As I say, these have probably never seen the light of day. They're just minging. It does actually have a little paper gasket on there, so if there is O-rings on this, then it is an oil seal differential. I'm going to take the planetary gears out and we'll have a look and see if there's any seals in there. So there is no seal on here or in the housing itself. I don't know if you can see it inside there. So my plans with this now is I'm just going to clean out all this old gunk and I'll replace it with some new stuff. So that is this front differential back together. Got some new grease in there. So I'm just going to repeat the process but in reverse. I'm going to get all this cleaned up a little bit and start putting it back together. I'm going to do this off camera because you've seen me take it apart, so it is literally just the reverse of what I did. So that is all back together. The newer shocks are back on there. I have Loctited all these output cups back on because, as I said previously, they'd all come off. I have had to re-glue these pins on the bottom. One of them had come off as I was cleaning all this stuff up. What I do with these is I just put a very light coating of GT85 on these and I'll leave this to soak, and it just gives it a bit more longevity. It is now a new day. This is a change of clothes here. It took all night for me to sort out that front end. So what I'm going to do now is start looking at the back end. With the back end, it's very similar. I'll actually show you how it looks. So looking at the back end, pretty much identical to the front. And we have the 4 screws there for the shock tower. There is the 4 screws at the bottom of the chassis, and we have the screws here for this top plate. I'll probably take this whole top plate off. So because of that, I'm actually going to do this off camera, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you what my findings are with this diff to see why it's not working properly. So I think I've come across the issue straight away after I've stripped most of this down. Very similar to the front end. That's obviously not supposed to come off. So I think what's been happening is this diff is actually spinning in this case, but it's not able to turn these because they're not tightened down properly. I'm hoping that's the issue, and I'm going to carry on going, check the diff, make sure the internals are fine, and I'll just do exactly what I've done with the other one, clean it all up and rebuild it. So that is the rear assembly all built back up. We now have drive again. See that there? Diff working as it should. So I'm obviously spinning that one back, that one's going forward. So it did turn out that it was these output cups. The grub screws had worked their way loose, and because of that they were just spinning on the diff, so it couldn't transfer the drive. That's pretty much it for part 2 for this one, and getting those diffs sorted. So at least that way we know that we're going to have some drive once we hopefully get this thing running. So in the third part, I am going to be basically just starting to really get this stripped down. I noticed this like your Ackerman arms on the front here. The pin that comes up from the chassis is moving from side to side, so that probably needs tightening up. I've mentioned the tank before. This had some glue on it. The glue's never going to adhere properly with all the fuel and oil on there. I'm guessing somebody's tried to do that to get its vacuum back, but it's just never going to work. So that does need replacing. I will take off all this box, and I'm hoping that the battery pack that you put the AAA, not the AAA, sorry, the double A's is going to be in there, hopefully. If not, I'm going to have to buy that. Some of the things I noticed is this lever, which I believe is for the brake, seems seized solid. It does look a bit rusty down there, so I've got that to look at. I'll check the servos work as well. If not, I've got some spares to change those as well. So I know I've named these videos Noob with a Nitro. I should probably mention that when it comes to RC, I'm not that much of a noob. I've got quite a few cars here. I've got 8 or 9 in total. So I've got a good understanding of how the suspension works on them, the differentials and all that sort of stuff. Literally, the noob part of it is that, the engine. So that is it for part 2, and I will see you in part 3. Thanks very much for watching.